Hi, and welcome to another segment of Pearced Off with Jonathan M.S. Pearce, the Skepticule Podcast segment for counter-apologetics and philosophy. I'm going to pick on something topical this time and talk about the recent incident in Sweden where a chap, Anton Lundin Pettersson, went into a school with a sword and a helmet and mask and killed a couple of people and injured some others. And it eventually came out that he had on his viewing list a couple of atheist podcasts. So the guy is most probably an atheist, but he also seems to be a bit of a racist, and so on and so forth. Anyway, what came out of this were the whisperings or sometimes outright claims that this guy's an atheist, therefore it's his atheism that caused the killing in some sense. And this is a really common sort of trope that you hear, that, X is an atheist and he did this thing, and so therefore it's the atheism that caused this thing. But actually you hear it the other way around as well. So these atrocities were caused under the auspices of religion, therefore religion caused these atrocities. And quite often there's a correlation fallacy going on, that in fact it's something else that's causing both of these things, or at least one of them, and there's this idea that actually it's not really that causal thing that's recognised, but some other notion that original correlation. For example, you could say, lots of people often say religion causes all the wars, but actually, really, you could argue it's a lust for power, it's control over people, and lots of other things that actually lead towards causing the wars, not necessarily religious content, or certainly identity politics. So I want to kind of investigate that a little bit in this segment. So this guy had the identity, let's say, of being an atheist, and so other people might come along and say, well, he's not a true atheist because of X, Y, and Z, and very close to the no true Scotsman fallacy, as you will hear with religious people as well, saying, oh, this Christian person murdered someone else, but no true Christian would do that, so therefore he wasn't Christian. And this may well be true, right? But at the same time, people invariably do not commit atrocities on account of their lack of belief in a God, or the belief that there is no God. Atheism realistically is not going to cause this guy to go around with a sword killing people, particularly when it looks like racism is actually a more obvious causal factor. But more generally, what's going on here? Well, people have a very naive understanding of causality. People think in terms of billiard balls, that one hits another, which hits a third. But the universe is not like that. And I have talked about this before, in whether I was responsible for a parent helper dying on one of my school trips. I think the segment, Have I Ever Killed Someone? I had gone on a school trip, to organise a school trip, and had parent helpers along, and we had to really pace it on the way there and go really quickly on the way back, because we were running late. Very quick, hard walk. All the children were really, really tired and overexerted. And it turned out that one of the parent helpers had a heart attack that night and died. So I asked the question, was I responsible for this guy dying? Now, he was very unhealthy and so on and so forth. But this is what I said in one of my pieces of writing on that. I've come to understand that causality is much more complex than one might imagine. A does not cause B, which causes C, in such a simplistic manner. At best, things are only ever contributory causes. But even then, this assumes that one can quantize time and arbitrarily assign discrete units of existence to both events and entities. So let's look at the event of the class trip. Did it start when we arrived at the dockyard, when we got off the ferry, when we left, when I started organising it, or indeed were elements of the trip in place when I started planning the unit, given the job as a teacher, I got my teacher's qualifications, etc., etc.? Of course, there's no objective answer to that. These abstract labels are subjectively assigned such that we can all disagree on them. That is, simplistically speaking, an element of conceptual nominalism. Likewise, there were necessary conditions in the parent's life which contributed to his death, anything from his smoking to his lack of general health, from deciding to come on a school trip to deciding to get married and have kids, send them to that school, and so on. An event happens in time, and arbitrarily ascribing a beginning and an end to that event is an abstract pastime, and thus fails to be, in my humble opinion, objectively and platonically real. So events themselves have these kind of labels that we ascribe to an event, and even that's problematic, right? But causality works through people, and harnessing it so that any one individual can claim themselves morally responsible for future events, which themselves are caused by effects preceding the individual, makes for tricky philosophy. This is a battleground for the free will debate, for sure. Arbitrarily cutting causality up in such a way is problematic. As I've set out in my analyses of the Kalam cosmological argument before, which one day I hope to turn into a book, causality is not a linear affair which can be sliced and diced. It's a unitary matrix which derives from either a single beginning, like the Big Bang, or eternally backwards, or reaching some time commencement, which could itself be a reboot or whatever, right? Either way, the idea of causality cannot be seen and should not therefore be seen in a discrete manner of units which can be attributed to equally problematic notions of events or unities. We are one big family of causality, this here universe. So in answer to the original question, no, I didn't kill anyone, and perhaps we could say that the universe did. That whatever notion I am and whatever I am represented by, Saturn, or better still, was part of the threads which cross and recross intricately and almost infinitely over each other in a mazy web of interconnected causality. And that's to say that really, if we're going to be accurate, the universe causes the next stage of the universe. So the Swedish man's atheism is not the cause of the killing. There are myriad causal factors, and I'm an atheist and I don't go around killing people, so there's definitely something else going on here. Atheism says nothing about morality, which is why frameworks such as secular humanism exist to provide a more complex philosophy than merely God not existing to define how to live one's life. And this works both ways, as I said at the beginning. Atheists have to understand that it's too simplistic to say religion causes X and Y. Often it's one of the major contributing factors, but the universe is often very much more complex, and human psychology is very much more complex than the content of a religion causing some moral atrocity. This is also not to invalidate the idea that something causes something else. I think we can still isolate things which are important or major contributing factors, such as we can say X caused Y, as a kind of shorthand for X is one of the more major and proximal causes of Y, but it's still sort of technically incorrect in some sense. So, did atheism cause this guy to go killing? Even by, and I have actually seen this on one conversation thread, by it being a sort of omission of a moral framework. But of course, it's just a simple belief in a proposition, right? There are so many other things that are going on in a single human's life. All those things that lead up to that person committing that crime are so complex that to just say, that was caused by his atheism is utterly facile. But can we isolate causality? Can we look at things? And I think, there are elements of that causal matrix that we can maybe isolate and say, well, if we had changed that, then this wouldn't have happened, that wouldn't have happened. And actually we look at most people who have these influences end up having these kind of outcomes. So, for example, I would look here at more the interest in far-right politics and why this chap seemed to be taken in by sort of racist and xenophobic tendencies. And that would be a much more sort of fruitful investigation. And if you can change that in people, then they're far less likely to go off and commit some atrocity. I don't think atheism in and of itself really does anything other than maybe mean you're I don't know. Actually, no, I'm not even going to say what I was going to say because I think it's too dangerous. Such a vague concept. It's not a vague concept, it's a very definite concept, but it has no other attributes other than a lack of belief in God, right? Or a belief that God doesn't exist. There is no moral dimension to atheism. It might lead you towards certain types of morality, like consequentialism, more likely than obviously divine command theory or something like that. But realistically, I think it's far too simplistic an idea. So that really is all I had to say about that. Atheism didn't cause this guy to kill two people, but I don't think it caused Pol Pot and Stalin to kill the masses of people they killed. There has to be an awful lot else in place in order for those things to take place. I wrote a big long piece on Hitler and Stalin and Pol Pot, which I'd advise anyone to check out on my blog. A Tippling Philosopher is my blog name. Please check me out, question everything, and be interested to hear what you guys have to say.